Why are you playing week 18 fantasy football?
Because you're too emotionally vulnerable to really fully acknowledge that fantasy football season is over.
It's over. Let's talk about it next.
You got a team, here's a word to the wise. You want to dominate your league? Go to football, guys.
Football. I'm living in a fantasy. Football. Got everybody mad at me. Football. Cause every game I had to win. Football. I gotta be a champion. Football. I'm living in a fantasy.
Oh, hopefully you won your championship. Hopefully you're done and you're thinking about playoff fantasy football. But either way, we are here for you. Welcome into the Audible and Bloom. Let's go over our yearly "You shouldn't play fantasy football championships in week 18" speech. We won't be cruel because every time we say that, people are like, I play this week.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a little awkward because for those of us in the content creation business, hate that term, maybe, I don't know, 5% or less of leagues have week 18 Super Bowls, but we've got to create our content the way we always do. But unlike the other 17 weeks, and every now and then it creeps into week 17 when a team locks up the number one seed early, or every now and then we'll have teams, well, even like the Russell Wilson thing kind of qualifies as, hey, when we get close to the end of the season, the decision matrix starts to get warped for coaches based on end of season thinking. But when we get into week 18, it gets warped in a way that is, number one, predictable and also just unjust, right? If you got to the fantasy football championship, some Baltimore or San Francisco player probably figured in. There's at least, I don't know, a 30%, 40%, 50% chance you have a player from one of those teams. So to not be able to use that player because they're so excellent that their team is able to take this week off, that just seems unjust. You're making the week that the most rides on, the week that some of the best players aren't going to play or are going to play very limited. So when you do play week 18 fantasy football, and hey, if you're here at the same time, I can make this rant. We can rant. We're good at ranting. Well, I mean, I'm a yellow belt. You're a black belt. But we're still here to serve you. I mean, that's football guys. We're the Sherpa. We're the guy who's saying, I want to climb that mountain. We're like, ooh, that mountain has a Yeti. Well, we'll still climb that mountain with you. And in the week 18 mountain, to get to the mountaintop, you really have to focus on which teams have something to play for. And it's a shorter list than usual this year. Buffalo, Miami, Jacksonville, Houston, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh. That's it on the AFC side. Dallas, Philadelphia, Green Bay, Minnesota, Atlanta. Yeah, Atlanta's still alive. New Orleans, Tampa Bay, and Seattle. So these are the teams that are really playing for something. Now, we can get into a larger discussion about, well, the Rams can, if they win, get the 6th seed. If they lose, they might be the 7th seed. That's the difference between probably playing Dallas or playing Detroit. Is that meaningful to Sean McVay? What's the past of Sean McVay? Is he going to play out week 18? You know, we've seen some coaches that have playoff teams and still have their starters play the whole game. They're not worried about risking injury. So there's that. There's the philosophy of coaches when they have the number one seed and know they're going to have a bye. Maybe they don't want their players to rest. Sometimes one half on week 18 can be enough to be more than a whole game from other teams. The other thing you might want to look at are spoilers. These are the teams that might have extra motivation because they can spoil. Remember, it's all divisional matchups in week 18. Tennessee against Jacksonville, Washington against Dallas, the Giants against Philly, Chicago against Green Bay, and they were eliminated. They were alive when we recorded on Sunday night, Cecil, eliminated. Now, Detroit's a fascinating spoiler because we could get into a whole discussion about how that game went Saturday night at the end there, Cease. But Dan Campbell, I mean, maybe he does play his starters for this whole game, more just to keep the energy going, to keep the us against the world, Detroit against everybody narrative going. So that one's interesting. Carolina, well, Carolina can have everything to play for. I'm not sure if we trust them. And then Arizona. Now, they're a really interesting spoilers. We saw Kyler Murray play his best game of the season last week. So you want to stay within those teams. And then you're going to really parse and listen to everything the coaches are saying. Because one of the other things that changes is the calculus on whether to play a player who's not 100%, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and so on down the line. So I think that like fantasy football is a puzzle, and we have a lot of different versions of the puzzle. The week 18 puzzle is kind of like when you build a jigsaw puzzle piece and you get close to finishing it and some of the pieces are missing.
Some of the pieces are missing. We're here to pick it up for you, though. That's our job, right? And you cut out so much there because the New Orleans internet bloom. I couldn't
Oh.
tell when you were done or not.
Sorry.
So hopefully I didn't cut you off.
Not at all.
Hopefully you won your championship. What are the Steelers? I just woke up.
Yeah, the Steelers are in it, but they need some help. So the Steelers,
Okay, so the Baltimore Ravens aren't going to play for anything, and the Steelers are in it. So is that an extra bonus for your fantasy team if you're playing? Because the combination is finding teams that are still playing for something, but finding teams that are still playing for something against a team that's not playing for anything might be the magic recipe. Mason Rudolph, here we come.
Yeah, Mason Rudolph and George Pickens and Deontay Johnson and Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, these players with the Steelers offense finally realizing between Matt Canada being gone and Mason Rudolph actually activating the downfield passing. And hey, this is one of the fact that Mason Rudolph done that around the league a while is helping the Steelers where Kenny Pickett still learning, still trying to discover his nerve, his boldness passing downfield. So absolutely. And see, I think we can look to Vegas, not the Raiders, but the lines and where Vegas is anticipating teams resting their starters. Kansas City's another one. I'm not saying we're going to go with any Chargers. I'm just saying that Vegas's lines indicate that there's an expectation that Baltimore is going to rest their starters, that San Francisco is going to rest their starters. And that is another thing we can use to see which teams we can trust. Baltimore, definitely not a team we can trust. The Steelers, we hope we can trust. We're becoming vulnerable enough to trust them again.
Right. Oh, boy. This is a live show, everybody. So we take what we can get. But my God, it is really bad this morning.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. Have you reset your router since you've been home? That's what I would guess.
Yeah, it was all reset.
Hardware upgraded. All done. Hardware upgraded. Just New Orleans internet. Flipping sucks. Anyway, what else sucks? Week 18 championships, but also for me, dynasty wise, this is where my radar's up. Bloom, I did not make it into the championship last week, so I've been looking forward to the future. And that's why when you see late season momentum from a Zamir White, players like this is where week 18 becomes more interesting to me because I'm like, who's going to show up at the end, even if it's just for a week? Like, do we see a little bit more of Jaleel McLaughlin, who has worked his way into Sean Payton's good graces as another Joker option? So is there more there? Are more things coming? That's what I'm watching for in week 18 personally, because I'm not playing other than, DFS or prop bets or whatever, like not doing that because, well, fantasy football should be over.
Here, I need to take a quick break. Hand the mic back to you.
Okay. Handing the mic off to me. Sigmund Bloom taking a quick break. That's fine. Everybody. Hey, I'll do this and I'll do this. And then I got to get rid of this. So how about that? Hey, how y'all doing? So yeah, let's go over week 18 and some players, some situations that I will be watching, some situations that you should be watching as well. We talked about Mason Rudolph. Looks like Tua Tagovailoa is all good. That was the report yesterday that I wrote about the Football Guys Newswire. Obviously, Jalen Waddle's probably going to miss another game. I know Mike McDaniel was like, it's fine, but he had to miss last week's game. I'd assume that Miami has to have him miss another week there as well in this winner-take-all game against the Buffalo Bills. But Tua Tagovailoa should be all good, although any sort of injury with him is concerning. I mentioned the week 18 matchups and who it could be and what you're looking for there. Alvin Kamara's day-to-day with an ankle. So you look to my buddy, Jamal Williams, but I also look to Kendre Miller, who hasn't been active. Oh, God, let me look at the last time he was active. When's the last time we even talked about Kendre Miller being a potential for New Orleans? Top of my head, I want to say it was like week 7, but I don't want to quote me on that. Okay, looks like week 9. Okay, week 9. He was out there, had 1 carry for 0 yards. So, yeah, maybe you could see something there towards the end of the year, because with Alvin Kamara day-to-day with an ankle injury, he might not be out there. It's Jamal Williams, but it's also Kendre Miller there as well. So I want to see who could be out there, how things go for players entering this last week. I mentioned Jaleel McLaughlin, as he's doing more, as he's the Broncos starter, everybody. And we saw that with, of course, Javonte Williams. Like, he's just not the same. So will Jaleel do a little bit more? Bloom, are you back? Just give me the thumbs up if you're back. Okay, he's back. Hi, Bloom. How are you?
Yeah, live TV, life happens. Life happens. Yeah, and I'm good. I'm good, you know. And the new year is here, and like we talked about, we're here to help people find meaning in week 18, and you left off with the idea of players who might get more opportunity. And in some cases, it intersects with some teams that do have something to play for. I mean, Bo Melton. Remember, Bo Melton was Seattle always seems to pick one or two of our favorite deep sleeper receivers in the draft or sign them as free agents. Bo Melton is one of those guys that ends up with Green Bay, that he gets his opportunity. So we're going to watch Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks. All of these guys are banged up, and Bo Melton was basically the number one receiver after Jaden Reed, or even before Jaden Reed went out. Melton was making contributions. He mentions Zamir White. That's a really good one. I think at this point, he's earned the opportunity to be the feature back next year. Like, let's Josh Jacobs, greener pastures, hopefully for him. But I think that this is an opportunity where Zamir White has shown that he should get an entire season to prove that he can be this team's running back of the future after what he's done over the last 3 games.
Yeah, we'll be looking for that, watching for that, and seeing what happens there. I did mention Kendre Miller. Give me some thoughts there if you want, with Alvin Kamara banged up. Yeah, and then we talked about Jaleel McLaughlin there as well. Yeah, so these are the situations I'm looking at, Bloom.
Yeah, and I think that, again, we can look at some of these other teams. I mean, here's some Week 18 players to watch, not so much with a Week 18 fantasy lineup mindset, but with what are you going to show us for the future mindset? I mean, Bryce Young is at the very top of that list, I think. We can look at Arizona and Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. For a little bit, there was a lull after Greg Dortch produced early, and then we've seen last 2 weeks he's been an important player for this offense and showing that he belongs in an NFL offense with a dedicated role. Some of the other teams that don't have anything to play for, we're going to. I think, would you say at this point, Cease, that Justin Fields has closed the door on Chicago taking a quarterback number 1, or is this one of those things we're not going to know until they take the pick up to the podium?
We'll know before then, but no, the door's not shut. There could be movement. Look where Ryan Pace is at now. Now, Bloom, I will anticipate where Ryan Pace is going to be.
Well, yeah.
And then where does that end up with Justin Fields, if in fact a deal is able to be put together? I've said too much already, but no, the door's not shut. The door's not shut.
And then there's Kyler Murray, and maybe these two situations could end up intertwined in some way. Kyler Murray and what he did last week could persuade more of the front office, of the ownership, to go forward with Kyler Murray, because both of these teams, Chicago and Arizona, can make a sea change at quarterback this offseason. And then alternatively, the team that acquires Justin Fields, the team that acquires Kyler Murray, will do that. So you can start to see Week 18 setting up the offseason storylines, right? You can start to see how, again, I mean, we're going to watch, for instance, on the AFC side, let's see what happens, with Cincinnati if they don't play Jamar Chase, if they don't play T. Higgins. Remember, T. Higgins is going to be a free agent. Tyler Boyd's going to be a free agent. Let's watch Charlie Jones. Let's watch Andre Yoshevus, and how these guys can give the front office one last thought about how they're going to address these situations, whether they need to sign somebody else to replace these players if they don't bring them back. Because I don't think Cincinnati doesn't strike me as the kind of team that's going to use a franchise tag on T. Higgins if that franchise tag is going to be north of 18-20 million. So but maybe depending on how these players play in Week 18, that gives them something to think about. So I think that there's always intrigue, even though when it comes time to set your lineups in a typical fantasy football setting, this is the most random and frustrating week.
Yeah, and that's why week 18 stinks for fantasy football because the randomness and the luck is just ramped up. And we're like, okay, is it going to be Jordan Mason this week?
Right. Or
Right?
Elijah Mitchell.
Exactly. Or
Or
both. Or
neither.
neither.
Or Tyron Davis Price gets called up from the practice squad, or did someone else sign him away? I don't even know. But that's the thing. We might see some practice squad guys. There's another good tip out there. Normally, when we see players getting off the practice squad, we're paying attention because it gives us some hints on injury situations, right? Which position got called up. But this week, for some teams, it might give us a look at who they want to get a longer look at. And we've seen many times players go pretty quickly. Remember, in the NFL, we like to think of things changing incrementally and gradually, and we can watch it coming. It's not like that. It's whiplash fast how things can change. And Willie Parker, I think, is a terrific example. See, if Willie Parker, if they had the practice squads expanded like they did back in the days of Willie Parker, he probably would have been a practice squad player. And what he did in week 18 made him into a starter, a very relevant, a Football Guys magazine cover boy, because of what he did in week 17, week 18, the last week of the season. So I think there's a lot of meaningful stuff, especially for the future in week 18, even though it's not very satisfying in the present.
Yeah, it's not that satisfying, but you can make it satisfying if you are playing. Who was it? I have to find it in the chat room. Lees. He scooped up Nick Chubb. Yeah, man. You're playing in a championship. You want your guy to get a ring. You got the bench space. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. See, so I can't remember who was telling me on the old social media that they won a championship and they scooped up Matthew Slater. Remember, Slater suffered that injury. Slater is arguably a Hall of Famer. I mean, it depends on your definition of Hall of Fame. If you have a cutoff, like if you think punters belong in the Hall of Fame, if you think kickers belong in the Hall of Fame, Devin Hester, we'll see. Matthew Slater is like the archetype of the special teams ace. If you ever hear the term special teams ace, the immediate Matthew Slater's the guy. So I love that. And I love the idea of picking up players to bring on your fantasy team, or otherwise coming all the way back to the genesis of fantasy football. Because we've even contributed to this. The fantasy football industry has contributed to this, where it's about winning or having better information or beating everyone to the punch or having the best strategy or figuring out a way to game the rules in the system to be number one. But where did fantasy football really start? What's the genesis of fantasy football? You're watching football and you're thinking, I could do better than this. I know better who's good and who's not. I want to be a GM. I want to have a team that I'm the one that calls the shots. And embracing the idea of having your roster for the final game to see who gets a ring is coming back to that. It's one of the things I've used to explain fantasy football to folks who aren't that versed in it is it's like Dungeons and Dragons. If you guys know what do the kids know about Dungeons and Dragons? I think it's made kind of a comeback. It's like Dungeons and Dragons, but with football players as the characters that we have, that we invoke their spells and their powers and have them clash and see who loses hit points and things like that. But it's fun. It's a game. It's a diversion. And I think when you embrace that and think of yourself, see, I always come back to like, on my dynasty teams, when someone goes on injured reserve, it's almost like I have tryouts. I look at players, I look at what they've been doing, I read about them. I have like 4 or 5 players that are the candidates. When I have to release somebody sometimes because someone's coming off of injured reserve, that's another process. But getting into that process, it's a peaceful place where you're in control. And that's something that our life lacks. There's so many things in our life that affect our emotions, that affect our well-being, that aren't under our control. So at least when we're playing our little fantasy football sandbox, we're at the wheel.
Yeah, we're at the wheel. We're ready to roll the 8-sided dice.
Yeah, 100-sided.
Yeah, there you go. I think D&D's larger than ever now.
Yeah.
We grew up in a time. I watched the documentary Attack of the Doc, by the way. Watch it. Chris Gore put it out. And it was about the rise of fall of G4 TV.
Mm-hmm.
Even they kind of skipped over when they brought it back for like 6 months, and it was terrible for reasons that I will save for another show, Bloom. But it was talking about how you and I grew up in a time where you didn't want to tell people you played D&D.
Mhm.
You didn't want to tell people you played comic books or read comic books. You didn't want to tell people that you played fantasy football,
Right.
whatever. Now it's just the opposite.
Revenge of the Nerds, right?
Now it's the opposite. Well, nerds run everything, so it's like, yes, but it's for the kids out there, Bloom.
Mhm.
It's hard to recognize or realize there was a time where you felt shame if you enjoyed Dungeons and Dragons or fantasy football or comic books or whatever. So
Yeah. Well, see, this now we're at the 20-minute mark when we're about to wind things up. We're starting the real show, and this is another one of those examples where this is a show. I think that we use fantasy football as the handshake, but really, I think one of the fascinating things is we are here in a new year. Happy New Year, everybody! It's great to travel through time with y'all. I think one of the most beautiful things that we do together with football is that travel that calendar together and all the specific parts of it, including junior, senior bowl and the Shrine Game and the Combine and draft and free agency. It's not just the season and all the drum beat of the season. It's also just going through life together. And we've made it into the future. It's 2024. That was unthinkably far into the future when we were kids. And there's been, in some ways, it seems like, wow, things haven't changed as much as we thought or projected it would in popular culture. But in some ways, things have changed in ways we never could have possibly contemplated. And one of those things is, as you mentioned, as you described, counterculture or subculture, right? There was a monoculture back when we were kids. There was a monoculture or a dominant culture, and then there were all these subcultures and countercultures, and there weren't as many zines, right? Everyone remembers zines. There weren't a lot of ways for subcultures and countercultures to gather and know each other and reinforce each other, right? Because one of the things I know we bemoan social media and the internet and all the evils of it, it's really just the evils of humans. It's always the technology. So if we're upset with technology, we're just upset with human beings. And what happens is people who felt isolated through this technology realize there's a lot of people there like me out there. There's a lot. There's not a shame. In fact, I can celebrate this. I can embrace it. I can really make it fully integrated and bring it up to the surface as part of my identity. And now I don't know if there's a monoculture. I don't know if there's really a dominant culture anymore. It's just a lot of countercultures, and you figure out where you fit. And we appreciate that so many people fit in with us.
Well, if the internet hadn't cut out, I'd be able to tell what you said. We'll save the countercultural talk for our other podcast. Let's wrap it up, and we appreciate you all for working through all of it with us. It's 2024, everybody. Thanks. Do the YouTube things. Help us grow the YouTube channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. He's Sigmund Bloom. Follow him on whatever it's called. At Sigmund Bloom. The show is at the Audible. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying thanks for watching. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty.